men's involvement. Let's bring in my panel this afternoon, Liberal Senator Maria Kovacic and Labor MP Josh Burns. Welcome to both of you. Maria, first to you. We'll talk about those comments in a second, but we have to comment on the fact that we're about to have an election in Tasmania, which is an extraordinary set of circumstances there. Do you think Tasmanians really want to go to the polls?
I'm certain that they don't, and I think they'd be rightfully annoyed, PK. I think it's very distressing to see what's transpired in Tasmania today, and this manoeuvre by the Labor Party in Tasmania will harm Tasmanians. It will disrupt their daily lives. They had a state election last March. They've just had a federal election, and to take them to the polls again, particularly during a cost of living crisis, which, represents, a lack of regard for what the everyday person is going through. And in my view, it's not a very good look for Tasmanian Labor today. Yeah, Josh,
it does seem like, there's an elected government and now Labor has brought this on. To Maria's point, is that the case? I mean, why would you call on an election like this?
Well, I mean, it's the Premier's discretion to call the election, but I mean, the Tasmanian political system is slightly different as well. The Hare-Clark system is something that we in the mainland don't really have much to do with. Look, obviously, the Tasmanian government lost the confidence of the floor of the Tasmanian Parliament, and that is essential in order to have a functioning government. I mean, we don't run governments where they can control a minority on the central Parliament. So it is important that democracy and the principles of democracy are maintained. However, on the specifics of the Tasmanian politics, I'll leave that to my colleagues in the South.
Absolutely. You are both not experts in Tasmanian politics, but it's a big political story, and there is a Liberal government there. Last question to you, Senator, if I can, on this. The kind of circumstances here are pretty wild. There's lots of reasons being cited for this, but just on this question of, the position Labor's in. Labor actually did extremely well in Tasmania at the federal election. Could this see the Liberal government lose power?
I think that's a matter for Tasmanians, and I think what's transpired today will be something that they won't be pleased about. But again, I think that is a matter for them, and they will send us a very clear message about what they think of this in the coming sort of weeks and months, I guess, depending on when this election is.
Yeah, we'll see. OK, we're keeping a watching brief on that. Maria, still with you. Alan Stockdale's comments. Whoa! Where does one begin? Assertive women in the party, need to be, watched in some way. There's a lot of assertiveness in your party. What did you think when you heard those comments?
Well, I don't think those comments are helpful in any way in terms of the tone of them. And I won't speak to the intention. I don't intend to speak for someone else. But I will say this, I echo the comments of our leader, Susan Lee, that we welcome assertive women in the Liberal Party, and there are many of us already here, and there are intelligent, engaged and articulate women in our party that want to see us do well, and that's what I would prefer to see us focusing on.
And Susan Lee said they should join the Liberal Party as well, but you're a pretty straight shooter. If you hear comments like that from somebody who appears to have power in the Liberal Party and you're a woman, doesn't really make you want to rush off and get a membership form, does it?
Well, I think it sends a message, again, as I said, that's not helpful. And again, I won't speak to the intent. But what I will say is the best way for any organisation politically to change and to shift and to move is to have more people involved at a grassroots level. And that's what we want and every political organisation wants. We should see more people participate. Our community, has 50% of it is female, 50% are women. And we want to see that kind of representation, not only in our party, but also in our party rooms across the country at state and federal levels.
Josh, this was obviously too delicious for the Prime Minister not to comment on because, it's not a happy day for the Liberal Party when stories like this are out. But you've heard from Maria there. Obviously, there are very strong women in the Liberal Party who would like to see more women with power in there. How do you respond to what's unfolded?
Well, clearly there aren't enough Marias in the Liberal Party, and when you hear comments like what we saw today, where there is sort of this culture inside the Liberal Party that says that we need to push down the ambitions of women. It's hardly surprising that when you look across the Liberals and the Nationals, of their 42 seats in the House of Representatives, less than 25% of them are women. Across the coalition, I think they've only got 10 in the House of Representatives, which is just the most extraordinary set of circumstances for a party that seeks to form government when less than a quarter of their own representation are a representative of over half the population. And unlike the Liberals and the Nationals, we set about setting in policy and structures within the party that would enable people to be promoted, to contest in winnable seats, and that's why I sit in a caucus with over 50% of the caucus as women. It's a representation of years of concerted effort and structures within the Labor Party that ensure that opportunity is spread and that the party represents and reflects modern Australia.
Yeah, the modern Australia language is also being used, of course, by your leader, Maria Susan Lee. She talks a lot about wanting to look a lot like modern Australia. You've been unsuccessful in getting Giselle Kaptirian elected into the parliament. She, of course, ran for the Liberals for the seat of Bradfield. Where does that leave the Liberal Party? Is that something that the Liberal Party is likely to contest in the courts?
Look, I can't comment on that. That's a matter for others, and I'd sort of point to a statement that Giselle has made. But one thing I will say that's really interesting here is that the Teal candidate, Nicolette Buller, in Bradfield, has self-styled herself as the shadow member for Bradfield for 3 years. She has been funded and actively working in that community as an alternate member for 3 years. Giselle Kaptirian had some 3 months. What we need to look at is obviously the result is very close. The initial count was won by Giselle. The subsequent count has been won by Nicolette Buller. So there are obviously, some differences there that will be addressed by the appropriate people. But I think it also leads into what political engagement looks like moving forward and the expectation of people around what the alternative representatives are doing and how they're doing it, and whether somebody who's sitting in the background for 3 years, ready to perform when the election comes on is the right approach, and whether that's something that we see more of moving forward. So it's an interesting scenario that we're faced with.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are you suggesting the Liberal Party needs to be more prepared, right? Like, help someone be the shadow candidate, if you like, for the whole term rather than just bringing them in right at the end?
I'm suggesting it's a very different approach that we haven't seen historically in this country. And I would probably suggest too, if I'd been somebody that had been campaigning as a shadow member for 3 years, that I'd want to win by a little bit more than 27 votes.
OK. On another topic, Josh, the Greens are saying today that the responsible thing for Senator Dorinda Cox to do is to resign from Parliament. That's fair, isn't it? She did run on a Greens ticket.
Well, of course they're saying that, Patricia, and they've also been, backgrounding against her since she made that decision. So they're obviously a little bit bitter over there. But I would make this point that, the more serious point is that we all join political parties because we want to try and help shape them. We want to be a part of the policy reforms that the political organisations that we're all members for, can achieve and can thrive for. And I owe a great deal to the Labor Party for helping me become the member for Macnamara and for my community electing me as the Labor member. And I feel a deep sense of responsibility and gratitude as part of all of that. But we're not robots. We're people, and people don't elect robots. They elect people who have thoughts and values and care about different things. And we are not just a sort of automatic machine. So okay. Obviously the Greens didn't fit Dorinda Cox anymore, and it's up to Dorinda to make the decisions. And I welcome her into the party, and I'm sure she'll make a strong contribution.
Let me put this to you: isn't that the same argument you could use for Fatima Payman then?
Well, of course you've got to be consistent in all of this, and that's my view. And I was. If you look back at my comments at the time around Fatima, I was, I obviously knew how much pressure she was in at the time, and I really felt for her in terms of how difficult some of the politics that both her and I had to navigate. I think you know, like let's be honest, like we're all people, and clearly the Greens have gone through, you know, massive changes over the last few years, and, you know, had an extraordinary election result both in the House and in the Senate. So it's you know, it's something where I think hopefully we can take a big deep breath. I welcome Dorinda into the party, and, you know, I know she'll do her best to get the best outcomes for the people of WA.
All right, we're out of time. Great to have you both on the panel. Thank you.